I stand outside my parents' suburban home, clutching two items that will change everything: the deed to my $5.5 million estate and a guest list for my upcoming housewarming party. My phone buzzes with another desperate message from my father. 6 months ago, they couldn't be bothered to attend my basic wedding. Now, after my property was featured on Luxury Living, they've suddenly demanded a family meeting. I straighten my shoulders and knock, ready to show them exactly what they threw away. Growing up, the Thompson family motto might as well have been appearance is everything. My parents, Gregory and Martha Thompson, built their entire identity around status symbols and the approval of others. Our house in the suburbs of Boston wasn't just a home, it was a showcase. Every dinner party, every vacation, every car purchase was calculated to impress. My father worked as an investment banker, and my mother was a real estate agent for high-end properties. They measured success in square footage and dollar signs. My older sister, Audrey, became the golden child early on. She followed my father's footsteps into finance, married a surgeon, and lived in a McMansion that was featured in a local magazine. My younger brother, Justin, went into corporate law, drove a BMW by 25, and dated exclusively from a pool of women my mother deemed appropriate. They were perfect extensions of my parents' value system. And then there was me, Colton. From an early age, I was fascinated by buildings themselves rather than their price tags. I would sketch floor plans in my notebooks while my siblings compared SAT scores. I noticed how spaces made people feel, how light moved through rooms, how materials aged and told stories. This quiet interest didn't translate well to dinner table boasting. Architecture? My father scoffed when I declared my college major. Unless you're designing skyscrapers for billionaires, you might as well learn to say, "Would you like fries with that?" My mother was more tactical. "Darling, why not business or law? Something that can actually support the lifestyle you're accustomed to." Despite their disapproval, I pursued my passion, working through college at various construction companies to understand buildings from foundation to finishes. After graduation, I was fortunate to connect with Samuel Blackwood, an older developer who saw potential in my approach to revitalizing historic properties. While my family thought I was struggling at an entry-level job at an architectural firm, I was actually apprenticing with Sam, learning the entire development process. "Keep your cards close until you have a winning hand," Sam advised me. "Some people will never see your vision until you've already built it." Taking his advice, I stopped sharing my professional life with my family after too many dismissive comments at holiday gatherings. They assumed my silence meant failure, and I didn't correct them. Meanwhile, I was working 14-hour days, learning everything from zoning laws to historical preservation techniques. The summer I turned 27, I secured my first independent project, a crumbling Victorian in a transitioning neighborhood. I bought it for a song, renovated it with sweat equity and Sam's guidance, and sold it for a 70% profit 6 months later. I rolled that money into 2 more properties, then 4, establishing a pattern that would build my portfolio faster than even I had anticipated. My family remained oblivious to my growing success. At Thanksgiving dinner that year, my father raised his glass in a toast to Audrey's latest promotion, then Justin's new Porsche, and finally turned to me with that familiar look of disappointment. "And Colton is still drawing buildings, was it? Well, perhaps next year will bring better opportunities." What no one at that table knew was that I had closed on $1 million commercial property that morning, my biggest deal to date. As they clinked glasses and pitied me, my phone was silently buzzing with congratulatory messages from my business partners. That night, sitting in my modest apartment, surrounded by blueprints, I made a decision. I would build my success on my terms, without their approval or acknowledgement. It was liberating. Without the pressure to impress my family, I could focus entirely on projects that aligned with my values. While they chased trends and status, I developed properties that preserved community character and created authentic living spaces. My business grew steadily, fueled by reinvested profits rather than flashy marketing. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment when the divergence between my true life and what my family perceived became irreversible. It was at my 30th birthday, a dinner my parents reluctantly hosted at their country club. After enduring 3 courses of subtle jabs about my underperforming career, my father stood to make a toast. "To my son Colton," he began, swirling his expensive bourbon, "who has yet to find his footing in the professional world. Perhaps this new decade will finally motivate you to reach for something more than mediocrity." The table fell awkwardly silent. My mother touched my arm in what she probably thought was solidarity but felt more like pity. My siblings exchanged knowing glances. What none of them knew was that earlier that day, I had signed papers finalizing my 10th successful development project, bringing my net worth to over $2 million. I had also been approached about a potential television feature on one of my historical renovations. As my father finished his backhanded toast, I simply smiled and said, "Thank you for your concern," then excused myself to take a call from an investor. That night marked the beginning of my complete emotional independence from my family's approval. I stopped attending Sunday dinners unless absolutely necessary. I declined invitations to their social events. I built a life based on my own definition of success, and for the first time, I was truly happy. I met Eleanor Wilson on a Tuesday morning at Copper Cup, a small coffee shop across from one of my renovation projects in Cambridge. I had stopped in for a black coffee before meeting with the Historical Preservation Committee, and she was grading papers at a corner table, her red pen moving decisively across student work. Our eyes met when I accidentally bumped her chair, causing her coffee to slosh dangerously close to her stack of papers. I apologized profusely, offering to buy her another drink. "Only if you promise not to orchestrate another near disaster for my third grader's dinosaur reports," she said, with a smile that transformed her entire face. Ellie was an elementary school teacher with a passion for nurturing curiosity in her students. She wore practical clothes, minimal makeup, and had none of the status markers my family valued. She drove an aging Subaru, lived in a modest apartment with a roommate, and got visibly excited about discount book sales. She was authentic in a way that felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. On our 3rd date, I took her to see one of my completed projects, a converted warehouse now housing artists' lofts and affordable apartments. I didn't tell her I was the developer, just that I thought the architecture might interest her. As we walked through the building, she ran her fingers along the exposed brick walls and commented on how the space felt both historic and welcoming. "Whoever designed this actually cared about the people who would live here," she said. "You can feel it in every decision." It was then that I told her the truth about my work, not to impress her with my success, but because her observation had touched the core of what I was trying to achieve. She was surprised but more interested in my design philosophy than my financial statements. That night, we talked until the security guard asked us to leave. 6 months into our relationship, I invited Ellie to a newly acquired property, an 1,880 fire station I was converting into a community arts center. I had arranged for a catered picnic on the empty 2nd floor, surrounded by arched windows and the building's original brass pole. There, among dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight, I asked her to marry me with my grandmother's ring, the one family heirloom that had always felt authentic to me. "Yes," she said simply, eyes shining. 1,000 times yes. As we began planning our wedding, our vision aligned perfectly, a meaningful ceremony that celebrated our love and commitment, not our bank accounts or social standing. We chose a small botanical garden with a rustic pavilion, planned for 75 guests, and focused on details that reflected our relationship rather than impressing attendees. When it came time to tell my family about the engagement, I knew exactly what to expect. The dinner at my parents' house unfolded like a script I could have written myself. "A teacher?" my mother asked, her voice dripping with forced pleasantness. "How fulfilling that must be." My father was more direct. "Son, You're finally settling down. Good. But surely you can aim higher than a public servant's salary. There's still time to reconsider. Audrey examined Ellie's ring with a magnifying scrutiny. Grandmother's ring? Well, I suppose vintage is in style. Though Patrick proposed to me with a 3-carat diamond from Tiffany's. Justin barely engaged, too busy checking stock prices on his phone to acknowledge my future wife. Ellie handled it all with remarkable grace, answering their thinly veiled insults with genuine kindness. Later that night, as we drove home, she took my hand and said, "I understand now why you keep your success private from them. No amount of money or achievement would ever be enough." We sent out wedding invitations 4 months before the ceremony. My family's response was lukewarm at best. My mother called with a list of suggestions for upgrading our venue, menu, and music choices. My father questioned our decision not to have a country club reception. My siblings asked if we had registered at the high-end department stores they preferred. Despite their reactions, I held on to hope that they would show up and perhaps finally see what truly mattered. Ellie and I continued with our plans, creating a day that would be meaningful to us, regardless of who attended. 1 week before the wedding, as we finalized seating arrangements, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Colton, your father and I have been discussing the wedding," she began, her tone already telling me everything I needed to know. With Audrey's charity gala that weekend, and Justin flying in from his conference in San Diego on Saturday, we're just not sure we can make it to your event. I gripped the phone tighter. "It's my wedding, Mom." "Yes, dear, I know," she sighed. "But to be frank, it doesn't seem special enough to rearrange everyone's schedules. If you had chosen the Four Seasons like we suggested, or at least hired that celebrity chef your father knows." My heart pounded in my ears as she continued making excuses. 20 years of conditional love crystallized in that moment into perfect clarity. "Let me make sure I understand," I interrupted. "You're skipping my wedding because the venue isn't impressive enough for you?" "Don't be dramatic, Colton. We're simply prioritizing. It's not as if this is a once-in-a-lifetime event for us as parents. We've already done Audrey's wedding at the plaza, and Justin will likely have an appropriate ceremony when he proposes to Brittany next year." I looked across the room at Ellie, who was watching me with concern, and made a decision that would change the course of our family dynamic forever. "I understand completely," I said, my voice steady. "You've made your priorities crystal clear. Goodbye, Mom." That night, Ellie held me as I grieved not for the family who would be absent from our wedding, but for the family I had always wished they could be. The morning of our wedding dawned with perfect late September sunshine, the kind of golden light that photographers dream about. I stood at the window of the small preparation room at the botanical garden, adjusting my tie and trying not to think about the 4 empty seats that would be in the front row. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Jack, my best man and longtime friend from architecture school. "Your almost wife sent me to make sure you haven't bolted," he said, handing me a small wrapped box. "She also wanted you to have this before the ceremony." Inside was a vintage compass with a note. "No matter what, we'll always find our way home to each other. All my love, Ellie." It was exactly what I needed in that moment. A reminder that, while the family I was born into had chosen not to be present, the family Ellie and I were creating would be built on an unshakable foundation. When I walked down the aisle and saw Ellie's entire family filling their side of the garden, her parents, 3 brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, even her 90-year-old grandmother who had traveled from Minnesota, the contrast with my empty seats was stark. But then I looked at the faces of friends who had become family. Sam, my mentor, sitting proudly in the front row, where my father should have been. Colleagues who had supported my vision when my family couldn't see it. Neighbors who had become friends. Every person present had chosen to be there because they genuinely cared about us. Ellie appeared at the end of the aisle in a simple lace dress, carrying wildflowers and wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The ceremony was everything we had hoped for. Personal, meaningful, and focused entirely on our commitment to each other. Ellie's father welcomed me to their family with a bear hug and whispered, "We're the lucky ones, son." Her mother cried happy tears and fussed over making sure we ate something at the reception. It was during the cake cutting that my phone vibrated in my pocket. I normally wouldn't have checked it, but there was still a small part of me hoping my family had changed their minds. Instead, it was a text from Audrey with a photo attached. My parents, brother and sister, lounging by a resort pool in the Hamptons, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, "Perfect weekend getaway. Sorry to miss your thing, little brother. Some opportunities are too good to pass up." I showed the text to Jack, who quietly took my phone and tucked it away, saying, "Not today, man. Today is about you and Ellie." He was right. I refused to let their absence taint the joy of our day. The reception continued with heartfelt toasts, our first dance to the song that had been playing at the coffee shop when we met, and conversations with people who truly cared about our happiness. After a honeymoon in Maine, where we stayed at a historic lighthouse keeper's cottage and spent our days exploring coastal towns, Ellie and I returned to begin our married life together. While she went back to teaching, I finalized the biggest purchase of my career, a historic estate on 10 acres just outside the city. The property was a 19th century manor that had fallen into disrepair, its once grand gardens overgrown, and its stone facades crumbling. Most developers would have torn it down to build luxury condos, but I saw its potential as both a home and a testament to preservation done right. I had been working on the purchase for months before the wedding, and now it was officially ours. "Are you sure about this?" Ellie asked, as we stood in the cavernous entrance hall, plaster dust dancing in the air around us. "It's magnificent, but it's going to be a massive project." "I'm sure," I replied, squeezing her hand. "This place has good bones, like Sam always says, and I think it's time to build something for us, something that reflects who we are and what we value." We moved in despite the ongoing renovations, setting up our living space in the one wing that was already completed. Each evening we would walk through the rest of the house, planning and dreaming together. Ellie had a natural eye for design and quickly became my most valued collaborator, suggesting uses for spaces that I hadn't considered and insisting we preserve original elements that gave the house its character. Throughout those first months of marriage and renovation, I maintained my policy of privacy regarding my family. They made no effort to reconcile after missing the wedding, sending only a generic gift card with a mass-produced congratulations card. I sent a polite thank you note and continued building my life without them. 3 months after the wedding, a package arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a velvet jewelry box containing my grandmother's pearl necklace, along with a handwritten letter. My grandmother had passed away 2 weeks before our wedding, a fact my family had conveniently failed to mention to me. The letter, dated 1 month before her death, read, "My dearest Colton, by the time you receive this, I will be gone, and you will be married to the woman you love. I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. Not because of your material success, though I've followed your career with great interest through Samuel, an old friend of mine, but because you've had the courage to define success on your own terms. The pearls belong to my mother, and I've left instructions that they should go to you for your bride. I suspect your parents will be displeased with my decision, as Audrey has had her eye on them for years, but I believe they belong with someone who understands their true value isn't in their price. Build a life of substance, Colton. Create spaces filled with light and love, and know that wherever I am smiling down on you. With all my love, Grandma Rose." I sat on the floor of our half-renovated library, tears streaming down my face, holding the last connection to the one family member who had truly seen me. Ellie found me there, read the letter, and wordlessly held me as I grieved for the grandmother I hadn't been given the chance to say goodbye to. That night, we made a decision. The library would be dedicated to Grandma Rose, featuring her photograph and her books that I would reclaim from my parents' house at some point. It became even more important to create a home that honored authentic connections rather than superficial impressions. In the months that followed, we poured ourselves into completing the renovation. I approached the project with the same attention to detail I gave my professional developments, and Ellie filled the spaces with warmth through thoughtful furnishings and personal touches. We didn't rush, understanding that some things couldn't be hurried, like the master craftsman restoring the original woodwork, or the specialized conservator repairing the stained glass in the main stairwell. By our 6-month anniversary, the estate had been transformed. The 10 acres of grounds now featured restored formal gardens, a renovated carriage house that served as my home office, and walking paths that wound through mature oak trees. The house itself balanced historic character with modern convenience, from the meticulously preserved facades to the state-of-the-art kitchen where Ellie loved to cook. We had created something extraordinary, not because of its monetary value, but because it reflected our shared values and vision. And we had done it without a single family member ever seeing it, or even knowing of its existence. 6 months into our marriage, Ellie and I had settled into a rhythm in our nearly completed estate. Weekday mornings found us sharing coffee in the sunroom before she left for school, and I headed to my office in the renovated carriage house. Weekends were spent exploring the property's 10 acres, planting in the kitchen garden, or continuing small restoration projects together. My business continued to thrive, with 3 major developments underway, and a growing reputation for historically sensitive, adaptive reuse projects. I maintained my low profile, letting my work speak for itself rather than seeking publicity. While competitors chased features in design magazines, I focused on building relationships with community stakeholders and preservation experts. That changed one Tuesday afternoon when I was meeting with a potential investor at a recently completed project, a former textile mill I'd converted into mixed-use space with affordable housing, artists' studios, and community facilities. As we toured the building, a woman approached us, introduced herself as Patricia Winters, and handed me her business card. Executive Producer, Luxury Living. "I love what you've done with this space," she said, gesturing to the soaring ceilings and restored brick walls. "But I'm actually more interested in another property that might be yours." The Westbrook Estate? I was surprised. We had never referred to our home by its historical name in any public context. I was researching historic properties in the area for an episode on architectural preservation, Patricia continued, and came across permit filings for a major restoration. Did some digging, found your company name, and connected the dots. Would you consider allowing us to feature it on our show? We showcase exceptional homes and the stories behind them. My first instinct was to decline. Our home was our sanctuary, not a showpiece. But as Patricia explained the focus of the episode, celebrating thoughtful preservation rather than just luxury for luxury's sake, I began to reconsider. The business exposure could be valuable, and more importantly, the show might inspire others to save historic properties rather than demolish them. "I'd need to discuss it with my wife," I told her. "This is our home, not just a project." That evening, Ellie and I talked through the pros and cons over dinner in our kitchen. She had the same initial reservations I did, but also saw the potential benefits. "Your work deserves recognition, Colton," she said, passing me a bowl of pasta. "And if it encourages even one developer to preserve rather than destroy, isn't that worth opening our doors for a day?" "What about privacy?" I asked. "Once this airs, people will know where we live, what we have." Ellie smiled. "I think we've been private because of your family's values, not ours. We're not showing off. We're sharing something we believe in. That's different." Her perspective shifted something in me. I had been keeping my success private, partly out of habit, and partly out of fear that I would somehow become like my status-obsessed family. But Ellie was right. Intention mattered. Sharing our home to promote preservation was aligned with our values, in a way that flaunting wealth to impress others never would be. We agreed to the feature with specific conditions. The focus would be on the historical restoration and craftsmanship, not on the property value. We would have approval over the final edit, and the exact location would not be disclosed for privacy reasons. The filming day arrived 2 weeks later. A crew of 8 people descended on our property at 7 in the morning, transforming our peaceful home into a buzzing production set. Patricia interviewed us in various rooms, asking thoughtful questions about our design choices, preservation philosophy, and the history of the property. "What made you decide to save this place rather than start fresh?" she asked, as cameras captured the intricate plasterwork we'd painstakingly restored in the formal dining room. "These details tell a story that can't be replicated," I explained, running my hand along the original crown molding. "When you strip a building down to drywall and mass-produced fixtures, you lose the craftsmanship that makes spaces feel alive. Modern materials have their place, but there's something irreplaceable about the patina of 200 years of life." As the day progressed, I found myself growing more comfortable with sharing our home and our story. Ellie was a natural on camera, explaining her contributions to the design with passionate articulation that clearly impressed the crew. By the time they captured their final shots of the sunset over our restored gardens, I felt a surprising sense of pride rather than exposure. "You two are not what I expected," Patricia confessed as the crew packed up. "Most homeowners with properties of this caliber are much more focused on the prestige aspect. We're just happy to have found a place that feels like home," Ellie replied, in the unassuming way that had first made me fall in love with her. The episode was scheduled to air 6 weeks later. In the meantime, life returned to normal, and I almost forgot about the filming day until Patricia sent us a preview link to approve. Watching our home on screen felt surreal. The production team had done a beautiful job, capturing not just the physical beauty of the property, but also the intention behind our restoration. They had respected our wishes, focusing on craftsmanship and history rather than luxury, though they did include one wide shot of the entire estate that showcased its grandeur, along with a mention of its approximate value. This $5.5 million historic estate represents one of the most significant residential restoration projects in the region. I winced slightly at the dollar figure, exactly the kind of detail we'd hoped to downplay. But the overall tone of the episode was exactly what we'd wanted. We approved it with minor edits, and the air date was set for the following Thursday. The morning after the episode aired, I arrived at my office to find my email inbox overflowing. There were messages from other developers seeking collaboration, historical societies, offering resources for future projects, and potential clients interested in my company's services. My assistant had logged over 30 phone calls before 9 o'clock. "The episode was a hit," she informed me, handing over a stack of message slips. "And your phone has been buzzing non-stop with social media notifications." I rarely used social media, maintaining only minimal profiles for business purposes. When I checked my accounts, I found hundreds of new followers and messages from strangers complimenting our home and my preservation approach. More surprisingly, there were messages from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly eager to reconnect. My cousin Taylor wrote, "Saw you on TV last night. Never knew you were doing so well. We should catch up." A distant uncle commented, "Proud to see a Thompson making such a mark. Your father must be over the moon." The most revealing message came from my mother's sister, Aunt Laura, who had always been slightly outside the family's materialistic orbit. "Colton, just saw your beautiful home. Not surprised by your success, but very surprised your parents never mentioned it. Guess the apple fell far from the tree in the best possible way. Would love to see you and meet your wife sometime. Love, Aunt Laura." Her message was accompanied by a screenshot of what appeared to be my family's group chat. Gregory Thompson. "Did anyone see Colton's house on that show tonight? $5 million. How long has he been hiding this? Martha Thompson. I just watched it on the DVR. That's definitely Rose's pearl necklace his wife was wearing. I told you we should have challenged the will. Justin Thompson. Always said I supported his architecture thing. Now we know why he's been so distant. Success changed him. Audrey Thompson. Unbelievable. That property is 3 times the size of mine. And did you see the historical significance they kept mentioning? Patrick says it would easily sell for more than they quoted if it hit the market. I showed the messages to Ellie when I got home, unsure whether to laugh or be angry. She read through them thoughtfully before responding. "They still don't get it, do they?" she said. "They're not proud of what you built or saved. They're just impressed by the dollar figure." She was right. Even faced with evidence of my success on their own terms, they couldn't see beyond the status and monetary value to appreciate what the project actually represented. They hadn't mentioned the craftsmanship we'd preserved, the historical significance we'd honored, or even the happiness evident on our faces throughout the episode. All they saw was a price tag and their own exclusion from something valuable. I decided not to respond to any of the messages that day, needing time to process my feelings. But the decision was taken out of my hands the following morning when my phone lit up with a text from my sister. "So, that house on TV last night, was that really yours?" Before I could decide whether to answer, more messages followed. From my brother. "Dude, why didn't you tell us you were loaded? Not cool keeping secrets from family." From my mother. "Colton, please call us. We have so much to catch up on." And finally, from my father, the message that would set everything in motion. "Family meeting, 8 p.m., urgent. Our house, non-negotiable." I stared at my phone, a laugh of disbelief escaping me. After years of dismissal and months of silence after missing my wedding, now they were issuing commands as if they had any authority in my life. The audacity was almost impressive. Ellie read the messages over my shoulder and squeezed my arm. "What are you going to do?" I considered my options carefully. I could ignore them completely, continuing our peaceful life without their drama. I could respond with a simple rejection, or I could go to the meeting and finally confront the patterns that had defined our family dynamic for decades. I think," I said slowly, "it's time to close this chapter properly. Not for them, but for me." I texted my father back. "I'll be there," and began mentally preparing for what would likely be the most important family meeting of my life. The next 24 hours brought an escalating flood of messages from my family. They started with casual inquiries about that beautiful house, quickly progressed to questions about my business and finances, and eventually evolved into thinly veiled suggestions about ways we could help each other out now that I was doing so well. My sister texted, "The country club is looking for new members. Dad thinks you should join now. Network with the right people." My brother wrote, "Hey bro, been thinking about getting into real estate investment myself. Let's talk opportunities. I've got some capital to play with." My mother left a voicemail. "Colton, darling, call me back. I'd love to help you and Eleanor plan a proper reception at your new home. Something befitting your status now." Each message confirmed what I already knew. They saw my success as an opportunity for themselves, not as an achievement to celebrate for my sake. They had dismissed my career until it produced something they valued, and now they wanted access to the results without having supported the journey. Ellie and I discussed how to handle the upcoming meeting over dinner. She offered to come with me for moral support, but I felt this was something I needed to do alone. "This is about closing a door," I explained. "Having you there would suggest I'm opening one." "What exactly do you plan to say to them?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "The truth," I replied. "For the first time in our relationship, I have nothing to lose by being completely honest." The next evening, I prepared carefully for the meeting. I gathered the wedding photos, showing the empty seats where my family should have been. I made copies of my grandmother's letter. I placed the deed to our estate and the guest list for our upcoming housewarming party in a leather portfolio. And finally, I added one last item, the unopened gift card they had sent after our wedding. As I dressed in a simple button-down shirt and jeans, deliberately casual compared to my family's certain formality, Ellie helped straighten my collar. "Remember, she said, kissing me goodbye. You already have a family. Right here. The drive to my parents' house in the suburbs took 40 minutes, time I used to mentally prepare. I rehearsed what I wanted to say, anticipating their likely responses and reminding myself to stay calm and clear rather than letting old emotional patterns take over. When I arrived, I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at the house where I grew up. It struck me how small it suddenly seemed, not in physical size, but in significance. The carefully manicured lawn, the pretentious columns flanking the entrance, the imported Italian stone pavers on the driveway. All the status symbols that had once represented success to me now looked like hollow attempts to impress passers-by. As I approached the front door, I could hear voices inside. I paused, my hand raised to knock, when my father's distinctive, authoritative tone reached me through the partially open dining room window. "Remember, the key is to be supportive now," he was saying. "No mention of the wedding situation until we've established a relationship with him again. We need to get back in his good graces before the Sullivan Gala next month." My mother's voice replied, "I've already told Caroline and Richard that our son would be happy to host their anniversary party at his estate. Imagine the social currency. The Thompsons with the most impressive property in the county. Do you think he'd consider investing in my startup idea?" That was Justin. With that kind of capital backing me, I could finally leave the firm and be my own boss. Audrey chimed in. "Patrick says we should get him to put the summer house in Maine under an LLC with family shares. Tax advantages for everyone." I stood frozen, portfolio clutched in my hand, as they continued plotting how best to benefit from my success. Not once did anyone express happiness for me or regret for missing my wedding. Not once did they mention Ellie, except as an accessory to their plans. They saw me not as a son or brother who had built something meaningful, but as an asset to be leveraged. Taking a deep breath, I finally knocked on the door. The voices inside immediately hushed. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal my mother, dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than most teachers make in a month. "Colton!" she exclaimed with practiced warmth, air kissing both my cheeks. "We've missed you so much, darling. Come in, everyone's waiting." She ushered me into the formal living room, where my father, sister, and brother were arranged in a tableau of casual affluence. My father rose from his leather armchair, extending his hand as if greeting a business associate rather than his son. "There's the man of the hour," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Quite the secret you've been keeping, son." My brother lounged on the sofa, smirking. Always the dark horse of the family. Who knew? Audrey remained seated, examining me with new interest. "Your wife has good taste." That pearl necklace she was wearing looked antique. "Family piece?" I took a seat in the one empty chair, placing my portfolio on the coffee table. "Yes, Grandma Rose left it specifically for Ellie. In fact, she left instructions that Ellie should have it." A brief flash of irritation crossed Audrey's face before she composed herself. "How nice. I always thought those pearls would come to me as the eldest granddaughter." "Enough about jewelry," my father interrupted, taking control of the conversation as he always did. "We've called this meeting because, frankly, we're concerned, Colton." I raised an eyebrow. "Concerned?" "Yes," my mother jumped in. "About this distance that's developed between us. Families should be close, supporting each other through life's journey. We've missed so much of your success story." My father nodded solemnly. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding somewhere along the way. We've always supported your career choices, even when they seemed unconventional. The audacity of this revisionist history was breathtaking." I glanced around at their expectant faces, all waiting for me to express gratitude for their fictional support, to fold myself back into the family narrative they were creating on the spot. "A misunderstanding," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call refusing to attend my wedding?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother recovered first. "That unfortunate situation," she said, waving her hand dismissively. We had prior commitments that couldn't be changed. You know how these social obligations are. If you had given us more notice, or chosen a more convenient date, you had 6 months' notice, I interrupted. And you were at the Hamptons, at a resort. I saw the pictures Audrey sent me during my wedding reception. Justin shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, maybe we made a mistake. But families forgive, right? Water under the bridge. My father, seeing the conversation derailing from his plan, took a different approach. Son, we're here to move forward, not dwell on the past. In fact, I have an exciting proposition for you. Of course he did. I waited, curious to hear exactly how he planned to benefit from my hard work. The country club is hosting its annual charity gala next month, he continued, leaning forward eagerly. Very exclusive, top-tier attendees. The committee is looking for a fresh venue this year, somewhere that would impress even the most jaded members. I've already mentioned that my son's historic estate might be available. My mother clasped her hands. Can you imagine? The Franklin Garden Society Gala at the Thompson Estate. We'd be the talk of the season. We could make it a dual celebration, Audrey added smoothly. Officially welcome you and Eleanor into society. I know several fashion editors who would love to feature her, with the right styling, of course. Justin nodded enthusiastically. Great networking opportunity, bro. I could introduce you to some serious players in finance. I know you've done well, but with the right connections, you could really take things to the next level. As they continued painting their vision of using my home as a backdrop for their social climbing, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Their transparent attempts to insert themselves into my success story weren't hurtful anymore. They were simply predictable. The family who couldn't make time for my wedding now wanted to use my home to elevate their own status. I allowed them to continue for a few more minutes, laying out their plans for my property, my wife, and my future, before I finally reached for my portfolio. I said quietly, interrupting my father mid-sentence about parking arrangements. It's time I shared a few things with you. The room fell silent as I opened my portfolio. I removed the wedding photos first, spreading them across the coffee table one by one. Images of Ellie and me exchanging vows, cutting our cake, sharing our first dance. And in each photo, visible in the background, 4 empty chairs in the front row, each with a small reserved sign bearing the names Gregory, Martha, Audrey, and Justin Thompson. Our wedding day, I said simply. 173 people attended. Family, friends, colleagues, even Ellie's great aunt who needed a wheelchair and oxygen tank to be there. But not one Thompson. My mother reached for one of the photos, her expression softening in what looked like genuine regret. The dress is lovely, simple, but elegant. Eleanor looks beautiful. Her name is Ellie, I corrected. And yes, she was beautiful. But more importantly, she was there. She shows up for what matters. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Son, we've acknowledged that missing the wedding was unfortunate. But dwelling on past disappointments isn't productive. We're trying to rebuild bridges here. Rebuilding implies there was something solid there before, I replied. I'm not sure that's true. I next removed my grandmother's letter, placing it in the center of the photos. Did you know Grandma Rose died 2 weeks before my wedding? None of you thought to tell me. I found out 3 months later when her lawyer sent Ellie the pearl necklace Audrey seemed so interested in. My father's face tightened. Mother's will was her own business. If she chose to leave certain items to your wife, instead of following family tradition, that was her prerogative, however misguided. The pearls weren't the important part, I said. This letter was. She was the only one who ever really saw me, and you deprived me of the chance to say goodbye to her. My mother at least had the grace to look ashamed. We were going to tell you, but with the wedding so close, we didn't want to burden you with grief during what should be a happy time. That wasn't your decision to make, I said firmly. just like it wasn't your decision to determine whether my wedding was special enough to attend. Justin, sensing the conversation was not going as planned, attempted to redirect. Look, we can't change what happened, but now that we know about your success, we can be a proper family again. Support each other. Celebrate together. Like you supported me when you thought I was struggling? I asked. Like you celebrated my small victories when they didn't come with a multi-million-dollar price tag? That's unfair, Audrey protested. We always wanted the best for you. If we pushed, it was to motivate you to reach your potential. I laughed without humor. My potential, according to you, meant following your path, chasing your definition of success. When I chose differently, you wrote me off as a failure. Now that I've succeeded by your material standards, though for entirely different reasons than you value, suddenly you're interested in being part of my life again. My father, never one to lose control of a situation for long, stood up and began pacing, his negotiator stance taking over. Colton, families are complicated. We make mistakes. We learn. We grow. Yes, perhaps we've been too focused on certain markers of success. But isn't this an opportunity to start fresh? To share in each other's lives more fully? That sounds reasonable, I acknowledged, if it were sincere. But I happened to overhear your conversation before I knocked, about getting back in my good graces for the gala next month, about the social currency of my home, about investment opportunities and tax advantages. The room grew uncomfortably quiet as I continued. None of you have asked a single question about how I built my business, about what the restoration process was like, about what Ellie and I love about our home. You've asked nothing about my life or my happiness. Your only interest is in what my success can do for you. My mother attempted damage control. Darling, you're misinterpreting things. Of course we care about your happiness. We're proud of what you've accomplished. Are you? I challenged. Or are you just impressed by the dollar amount attached to it? Would you be having this family meeting if the TV show had featured my work restoring affordable housing instead of a multi-million-dollar estate? Their silence was answer enough. I removed the final items from my portfolio, the deed to our property and the guest list for our housewarming party. We're hosting a celebration next month, I explained, setting the guest list on top of the deed, 125 people who have actually been part of our journey, friends who showed up for our wedding, colleagues who believed in my vision when you dismissed it, Ellie's family, who welcomed me without question, neighbors who brought food when we were too busy renovating to cook. I pointed to the last page of the list. You'll notice your names aren't there. My father's face reddened. This is childish, Colton, excluding your family out of spite. It's not spite, I replied calmly. It's boundaries. For years I chased your approval, twisted myself to fit your expectations, and was still found wanting. When I finally built a life that brought me genuine fulfillment, you couldn't even show up for the most important day of that life. Now that my success is visible in terms you value, you want access to it without acknowledging the harm you've caused. I stood up, gathering the wedding photos and letter back into my portfolio, leaving only the deed and guest list on the table. I'm not here to negotiate terms of reconciliation. I'm here to make something clear. The relationship we had, where my worth was measured by your standards and my achievements only mattered if they impressed your friends, that relationship is over. You can't just throw away your family, Audrey protested, genuine distress finally breaking through her polished facade. I'm not throwing anyone away, I clarified. I'm establishing what kind of relationship is possible going forward. If you're interested in getting to know the real me, the person I actually am rather than who you wanted me to be, that door remains open. But it comes with conditions. Respect for my wife, my choices, and my boundaries. I picked up the unopened gift card they had sent after the wedding and placed it beside the deed. Your gesture after missing my wedding. I never opened it because no gift could compensate for your absence. Now, it can serve as a symbol. You have a choice to make. You can continue seeing relationships as transactions, where people's value is determined by what they can do for you. Or you can learn to value people for who they are, not what they have. My father, never comfortable with emotional confrontation, retreated to anger. So, that's it? You show up, lecture us about our failings, and leave? After all we've given you, all we've sacrificed to give you the advantages you've enjoyed. I paused at the door, turning back one last time. What you gave me were material advantages and conditional love. What I needed was acceptance and support. I've built a life without the former and found the latter elsewhere. The invitation to be part of that life exists, but not on the terms you're used to. The choice is yours. With that, I walked out of my childhood home, feeling lighter than I had in years. Whatever they decided, I had finally spoken my truth without apologizing for who I was or what I valued. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't leaving with the weight of their disappointment. Instead, I left them with a choice: evolve or lose me completely. As I drove home to Ellie and our beautiful estate, valuable not for its price tag but for the love and intention we'd poured into it, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The confrontation hadn't gone exactly as planned, but it had accomplished what mattered most. I had honored my own truth and established clear boundaries for the future. My phone remained silent that night, and I slept better than I had in years, wrapped in the certainty that whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. 3 weeks passed without a word from my family. Ellie and I continued preparing for our housewarming party, focusing on celebrating with the people who had actually supported us through our journey. The estate looked magnificent in the early autumn light, the gardens offering their last colorful display before winter, the newly restored exterior gleaming against the backdrop of turning leaves. The morning of the party, I was reviewing final arrangements with the caterer when my phone rang. It was Audrey. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for either hostile accusations or manipulative pleas. "Hello, Audrey," I said neutrally. "Colton." Her voice sounded different, less polished, more genuine. "Do you have a few minutes to talk? I'm in the middle of something, but yes, I can spare a moment." She took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since your visit, about what you said regarding how we measure people's worth. And I think you might be right." This was unexpected. Audrey had always been the most aligned with our parents' value system. "The night after you left, Patrick and I had a huge fight," she continued. "I was upset about what you'd said, and he told me I was overreacting because your brother's just jealous of our lifestyle. But that wasn't what upset me at all. What bothered me was recognizing myself in your description of our family." "I see," I said cautiously. "I've spent my entire adult life accumulating status symbols that don't actually make me happy," she admitted. "My marriage is a partnership of convenience more than love. My friends are connections, not confidants. When I saw you and Ellie on that show, what struck me wasn't the value of your house. It was how genuinely happy you both looked." I leaned against the kitchen counter, surprised by her vulnerability. "That's perceptive, Audrey. I don't expect you to forgive us overnight," she continued. "But I wanted you to know that at least one member of the family heard what you were really saying. I'm trying to make changes, starting with therapy. And I've told Mom and Dad I won't be attending the Sullivan Gala because I'm reassessing my priorities." "How did they take that?" I asked, genuinely curious. She laughed softly. "About as well as you'd expect. Dad called it a phase, and Mom sent me links to 3 different life coaches who specialize in success mindset. Justin thinks I'm having a nervous breakdown. And what do you think?" "I think I'm finally having a moment of clarity," she replied. "I don't know what my life is supposed to look like yet, but I know it can't continue as it has been. And seeing you break free of the family pattern gave me hope that I could too." We talked for another 20 minutes, more honestly than we had in our entire adult lives. By the end of the conversation, I had made a decision that surprised even me. "Audrey," I said, "we're having a housewarming party tonight. If you'd like to come, just you, not Mom and Dad or Justin, you'd be welcome. Not as a Thompson making an appearance, but as my sister trying to make a change." There was a moment of silence before she responded, her voice thick with emotion. "I'd like that very much." That evening, as twilight settled over our estate, 126 people gathered to celebrate our home. Friends from every phase of life mingled with colleagues, neighbors, and Ellie's expansive, warm family. Sam, my mentor, now in his 70s, held court in the library, telling stories of historical renovations to rapt listeners. Ellie's parents moved through the crowd, introducing themselves to everyone, as if each person were an old friend they were delighted to reconnect with. Audrey arrived 40 minutes after the party began. She looked different, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, rather than her usual designer attire. Her hair pulled back naturally, minimal makeup revealing freckles I hadn't seen since we were children. She stood hesitantly at the entrance to the grand hall until Ellie spotted her and immediately went to welcome her. I watched from across the room as my wife, who had every reason to be cold to the sister-in-law who had dismissed our wedding, instead greeted Audrey with genuine warmth, taking her arm and guiding her into the party. By the time I joined them, Ellie had already introduced Audrey to her brothers and was explaining the history of the original woodwork we'd preserved. "This place is extraordinary," Audrey said when I approached. "Not because of what it cost, but because of what you've saved. There's a feeling here that our house never had." "That's exactly what we were going for," I replied, surprised and touched by her observation. Throughout the evening, I watched Audrey slowly relax, engaging in actual conversations, rather than the networking she had been trained to do at social events. By the time dessert was served, she was sitting on the floor of the sunroom with a group of Ellie's former college roommates, laughing genuinely about something I couldn't hear. As the party wound down around midnight, Audrey found me in the kitchen where I was thanking the catering staff. "Thank you for including me," she said simply. "This was the most real social event I've attended in, maybe ever." "I'm glad you came," I replied, and was surprised to realize I meant it. "Mom and Dad aren't going to change," she said with quiet certainty. "Neither is Justin. They can't see what's wrong with their worldview, because it's worked for them, at least on the surface. But I wanted you to know that what you said that night didn't fall entirely on deaf ears. One Thompson heard you." I hugged my sister for the first time in years, not because of obligation or appearance, but because I wanted to. The following year brought significant changes. Audrey filed for divorce from Patrick, moved to a modest apartment, and began teaching art classes at a community center, reconnecting with a passion she'd abandoned in high school when our parents deemed it impractical. We met for coffee every few weeks, building a new relationship based on authenticity rather than shared DNA. My parents and Justin made a few more attempts to insert themselves into our lives, each transparent in its self-interest. Invitations to events where we could be showcased, business proposals that would primarily benefit them, social introductions that would enhance their standing. Each time, I politely but firmly declined, maintaining the boundaries I had established. As our first anniversary in the estate approached, Ellie and I decided to use our home in a way that would have horrified my status-conscious parents. We opened it for a series of community events, from educational tours for local students to fundraisers for affordable housing initiatives. We established a small foundation focused on historical preservation in underserved communities, using my business success to create opportunities for others rather than to accumulate status. On a warm Sunday afternoon in late summer, Ellie and I sat on the terrace overlooking the gardens, watching as a group of architecture students sketched the facade as part of a workshop I was hosting. "Do you ever regret cutting ties with your parents?" Ellie asked, her hand resting lightly on mine. I considered the question carefully. I regret that they couldn't be the parents I needed. I regret that they missed the opportunity to know you, to be part of our life together. But I don't regret establishing boundaries that protected our happiness and values. She nodded, understanding. Your grandmother would be proud of what you've built. Not just this house, but your life. The funny thing is, I reflected, all those years I spent trying to please my family, I was looking for validation in all the wrong places. Real success isn't about impressing others or accumulating symbols of status. It's about creating something authentic and meaningful. I looked out at our property, the historic home we'd saved, the gardens we'd restored, the community we'd welcomed into our space, and felt a profound sense of peace. The most valuable things in my life couldn't be quantified in dollars. Ellie's unwavering support, the genuine relationships we'd cultivated, the integrity with which we'd built our shared life. The journey from seeking external validation to finding internal fulfillment hadn't been easy. It had required confronting painful family dynamics, establishing difficult boundaries, and redefining success on my own terms. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. By letting go of the need to impress others, I had created something far more meaningful than my family's shallow version of success could ever offer: a life of substance, authenticity, and genuine connection. That evening, as Audrey joined us for dinner on the terrace, I realized that sometimes the family we create through choice and shared values is more meaningful than the one we're born into. My grandmother had understood this truth all along, recognizing that true wealth comes not from what we own, but from how we live and who we choose to welcome into our hearts. So what about you? Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and being true to yourself? How did you handle that difficult balance between family obligations and personal boundaries? I believe there's immense power in sharing these stories, so please leave a comment below about your own experiences with family dynamics and personal growth. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more authentic life stories. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar family pressures, share this with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, the most beautiful homes aren't built with money, but with intention, authenticity, and love. Wishing you the courage to create a life that reflects your true values, whatever they may be.